Genchi desu ka? It's Coco Hodo, and today we'll be looking on replacing our default text editor. And by default text editor, I mean nothing else but gedit. That is basically older than Chino. Older than me. Older than my big sister. Older than my mom. Because you may have forgotten, but gedit initial commit goes way back in 1998. Ah, the 90s! When everything was so much simpler. So back then the full app was a few files and just 1500 lines of code. And perhaps gedit was always a bad text editor, but it was also always there and for everyone. It is very unlikely to find a single person using Linux for a couple of years, and never used gedit. But everything comes to an end, and every end is a new beginning, and what a better time to make a new start, now there is a brand new GNOME text editor on FlatHub. So here it is, saying it is a text editor for GNOME, but it is so much more. It is an editor focusing on a pleasant #default experience, which pretty much means that's gonna be the default editor of GNOME project, start rolling perhaps from the very next release in GNOME 42. On the question what happened to gedit, there are a couple of spots that explain the drop. So, to the PowerPoint. Even if gedit tried to fit in on the newest GNOME app ecosystem, it never really felt like a part of it. And moreover, the last 4 to 5 years gedit didn't have that much of a development, with some exceptions maybe, but it wasn't enough. Another reason is that gedit didn't follow up on the code editor's territory, and it stayed out of business. Long story short, it became too weak for a code editor but quite over-engineered for a text editor. And finally, the new editor is derived by GNOME Builder, and the plan is simple. Keep the code bases close between the two projects, but keep their scope distant. Builder is for coding, and the text editor is for quickly editing some files like configs or notes. But let's see what this editor is capable of, shall we? And so, the app uses GTK4 and libadwaita, and it also uses GTK Source View 5 that brings many performance improvements with NGL renderer, and especially on high DPI systems. Some of the editor main features include a search, and a search and replace that is the same widget like Builder. But perhaps a unique characteristic of this app is its settings design, with this sidebar. And meanwhile, if you aren't very lazy, please throw a comment about it. From there, we have some common functionalities like the minimap, or a theme selection, that to be honest is very poor for the modern standards. And by the way, we don't have a plugin system for the community either. A nice thing on this editor is the recent design that for now is empty, but it works pretty good in general. And one last thing I want to highlight is the tabs, that will stay open the next time we launch the app, similar of what Elementary does for Ages. Of course there are many more features that relate with the GTK source view, but I'm not going to cover those. However, this app really miss a VI keyboard mode, that I hope it will land someone in the future. And it also misses a command palette, even if Builder has that, and it is awesome. Speaking of Builder, there is one last matter to discuss, and that is the language. So there are a couple of good reasons why Builder is written in C-lang. For start, Christian Hergert is a C maniac. Then, when Builder started, Rust-lang was a baby. I'm not even sure they were GTK bindings. And of course GTK is written in C, so it makes sense to create a GTK IDE on C too. Plus you don't want to be dependent on community bindings for such large project. But when in 2021 you release a small desktop app written in C, one thing you should be aware of. Don't wait for contributors. It is not going to happen. It isn't even happening in GNOME Builder, and I wouldn't be much optimistic on what will happen to the project when Christian quits. Anywho, we can only fight with what we have, but at least we should use it the best we can. So if you search for the text app on GNOME software, you will most probably find that from the FlatHub repository. But that's not what you want. What you really want is a development version from the GNOME Nightly. So let's quickly get that, and set up everything else we'll need. First things first, you need the GNOME remote, so if you don't have it already, it is a good time to add it. Then you need to install the app, so Flatpak install, and just say text. Then you want to pick on GNOME Nightly, and if all good, you should next see the development edition from the main branch with daily updates. Which reminds me, you need a good internet if you want to use this remote on its full potential. So, now you have it installed, you can start it from Overview. And you'll see both the stable and the development releases, and the last uses those under construction stripes so we can recognize it. And those stripes are also on header bar, that I believe they look awful and it is like a visual regression. But if we skip that, we can see we're already on GNOME 42, so welcome aboard to the next release that is officially arriving in March 2022. Now, we can go to a text file and register our new text editor for opening it. But if we want to use it from the command line, we should type Flatpak run in the full domain name, which is far from optimal. What we can do to improve this situation, is to edit our shell environment a bit. So we want a Flatpak section, that will only export the Flatpak bin directory to our path. So our new path should be equal to $path, in the Flatpak bin directory. And since I'm here doing that, check out this tiny tip if you like. You can add $path at the end, if you want to override a system-wide command with something different. In either case, we can now go back in our terminal, and in a new session we can get auto-completion for all our Flatpaks. This is a major improvement towards perfect convenience already, but for such an app we most often use from terminal, we need one last step. So back to our editor into our shell configuration, we're gonna create an alias. I'm against aliases because they most often add complexity and not help the memory, but that's a special occasion. So now we can just say gedit for, and even pass a parameter like creating a new file, and done. Crap done really, because the file will open on an existing app from another desktop, but we won't receive any visual feedback. But whatever, and bothering with GNOME shell failures is out of context anyway. But one relevant misfortune is that we can't open files with administrator privileges directly from the text editor. Instead, we can use the admin backend of files, and put our super secure password. And now we have full access to the file system. For example, we can go to USR, and create a new file inside there, just like that. And then we can open it with our Flatpak editor. But only after we put our strong password, again? And anyway, we can now edit the file and all, and we also have a tiny message on header bar telling us we're using the administrator backend. Oh, and meanwhile, you notice how this time shell changed desktops when we open the file? Are we catching up with Plasma Mess? Is it a competition? So basically we have a bad app, that replaces a worse app. So in a sense it is an improvement. But it is also a significant app, and most probably it will be here to stay. To be fair, it is an extremely practical text editor, it performs fast, it is pretty enough, a VI editing will making a huge difference and most probably will come. But having in 2021 desktop apps written in C? Are you serious GNOME?